Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy. On the warning charts here, we've got a high wind warning out for St. Lawrence Island and up across the Bering Strait and the northwest coast here for tonight, continuing through tomorrow and tomorrow night, and possibly even into Tuesday up through this area. Winds expected to gust over 60 miles an hour in these areas from the northeast. Again, starting tonight, this evening, when the warning level kicks in. And then there's wind advisories here for the central interior, Yukon Flats, Koyukuk Valley, Kobuk Valley, and also all of the Brooks Range for northeast winds gusting above 40 miles an hour. And that's out through tomorrow. And looking at the satellite imagery, you can see the storm that brought the strong winds to Kodiak Island quite vividly here, wrapping up and moving back to the west-northwest, and that brought some pretty strong winds. 73 miles per hour was the strongest gust at Augustine Island there in Kamishak Bay. Otherwise, about 70 mile an hour wind gusts reported at Akiak, and Kodiak State Airport had a gust to about 60 miles an hour today. So this is quite a wind producer as it pulled back to the west. Storm force winds up along the North Gulf Coast, especially down along the southeast coast as well, associated with a front up into the interior here and wrapping back in around. Not too bad out over the Aleutians here, a lot less wind and clouds out in that area. Rainfall amounts not all that heavy. Yakutat picking about 3/4 of an inch of rain with that system today. And Kodiak had about 2/3 of an inch as well. So really this was more of a wind than rain producer. And rolling this by again, winds will begin to come down here as this low pulls back to the west and the gradient relaxes there. But along the southeast coast, winds will stay up probably through tomorrow at gale force here, with that frontal boundary staying pretty much in place there, and then the other system right there coming up. That'll be moving up and kind of dropping into its place later tonight and through tomorrow. Out in the Bering Sea, mostly a northeast wind blowing out there, and most of the cold air staying back to the west here and dropping down, but that should gradually start filtering its way southward over the next couple of days. And on the chart today for tonight, you can see this low center weakens and pulls back to the southwest Bristol Bay area, just north of Nelson Lagoon. In that area with some showers across the peninsula. Frontal boundary right through here, band of snow pushing up into the interior there. But the wind's quite strong, especially on the north side of this. You can see where the high wind warning areas are, the northwest coast down into St. Lawrence Island. Again, look for gusts above 60 miles an hour from the east-northeast. Pretty windy again. The wind advisory is out for the Brooks Range area for wind gusts over 40 miles an hour. Less wind along the Arctic coast, especially the central coast there, but not altogether ending in that area. Still pretty gusty on the east side and quite windy here on the west side as well. Central coast will probably see the lightest winds, but not much in the way of any precipitation up in that area. Here's the next system lifting northwestward, and that's going to keep the gradient quite tight here along the southeast coast and over the eastern Gulf of Alaska, and as well as the North Gulf Coast as well, and with some more rain pushing up with that toward the Panhandle tonight, really pushing into the area tomorrow as that thing moves on up to the northeast there. And it won't be till probably tomorrow evening that the winds will begin to die down along the coastal areas there. But there's the next system due into the area late tomorrow night, early Wednesday morning. That'll bring more wind and rain with it. Looks like that low center will probably move. Actually, this one will come in, as we see, that moves up on Tuesday. And then the next one down here, that's just off the chart, that will be coming up and hitting the area, probably the south coast late Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning. Looks like the low center initially will stay a little farther to the south there, although it'll be stronger. Otherwise, this one will move up tomorrow and back to the west, looking at just some rain and snow showers along the North Gulf Coast, areas of snow with mostly cloudy skies over the interior, mostly the central and eastern interior. Still strong winds over the northwest part of the state. Fair conditions though, but most of the wind out in that area back across the Brooks Range. And the wind warnings there, St. Lawrence Island up to the northeast. May end here for St. Lawrence Island, probably holding at least the storm force winds for the northwest coast and the marine areas there. A few flurries may work down from the northeast there into the Arctic coast, but not too bad. Nothing significant or very widespread. Otherwise, down over Bristol Bay, still have low pressure there. Another center down through here that's kicking off to the southeast. And kind of a cold air mass now in place over the Bering Sea with snow showers all the way down to Adak and Atka. The milder air with this circulation, keeping it rain or snow. Probably just rain showers here over the Alaska Peninsula. Showery conditions, Kodiak Island, lighter winds, and rainfall not all that heavy. Well, temperatures today down along the southeast coast, we're mostly in the lower 40s to near 50 degrees today, with pretty uniform temperatures back along the North Gulf Coast as well. Lower 40s, 42 at Cordova, and Homer at 48 degrees today with 3/100 of an inch of, or 33, about a third of an inch of rain fell in Homer. 3/100 of an inch fell at Bethel, where some of that fell as a form of sleet and freezing rain. 15 today in Gulkana, up to 37 at Talkeetna, 35 Palmer, and a 36 in Kenai. Teens over the Tanana Valley, Delta 19 degrees, seeing winds gusting to 50 miles per hour there. 7 degrees at Nenana, 6 at Tanana, -2 at Fort Yukon, 18 below, both at Arctic Village and Dead Horse. And this is, I believe, Etusuk there at 23 below, -6 at Cape Lisburne, 0 at Ambler, 9 degrees at Buckland, 6 Kotzebue, and 5 degrees at Teller. Nome up to 20, and otherwise 11 here at McGrath with 16 at Sleepmute, 23 degrees at Macoriac, mostly in the teens here along the Yukon Delta coast. And out to the west, mid-30s, lower to mid-30s there for the Pribilofs with those northeast winds. Upper 30s to lower 40s for the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula, although more in the 40s here up to the northeast. And for the lows tonight, again, well below 0, 20 to 30 below for the North Slope. Otherwise a little milder there along the Arctic coast, 10 to 20 below for that area. Either side of 0 through the central interior with, again, south of the mountains, much milder, upper 20s to lower 30s, near 40 in some areas along the coast, and 30s out over the Aleutians. Highs for tomorrow below 0, North Slope, or the Brooks Range here, out to the coast, and a little above 0 for the upper Yukon Valley, 20s out toward the southwest coast, and in the instance of Macoriac, may be up to 31 degrees. Add 10 degrees to that for the Pribilofs, near 40, give or take there for the Aleutians, and in the 40s for the Panhandle. Flying weather, look for IFR again, another system coming north, and that's going to keep it pretty low on the flying conditions. Marginal VFR generally over the inner areas, with IFR back along the North Gulf Coast. Into the east side of the Kenai Peninsula again, up western Prince William Sound. Also, at least to start with, the east side of Kodiak Island. And not too bad up over the interior. Have an area of marginal VFR lifting northward with that front and the moisture up toward the Brooks Range, not quite reaching it, but extending back into Norton Sound. Areas IFR along the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians, and probably near the Pribilofs. As far as passes go, Anatuvik VFR tomorrow, Adigan VFR. May see an increase in the clouds, but I think conditions will stay above that marginal threshold. And for the Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR on the eastern approaches with VFR to the west. Same forecast for rainy. And for windy, looks pretty good tomorrow, as does Isabel and Mentasta. Should all stay open, VFR conditions. Tanita, VFR becoming marginal. And for Portage, about the same. IFR in the east entrance, otherwise marginal. Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. And the freezing levels here, 2,000 feet from the central Aleutians, kind of arcing up to near Kuskokwim Bay on up to the northeast, and 4,000 feet right along the North Gulf Coast and across the Kenai Peninsula. A little bit warmer by about 2,000 feet down here over the southern panhandle. Icing threats with the front kind of dissipating, lifting northward right through here tomorrow. And then that next frontal boundary coming up, bringing more icing, possibly of the moderate variety, like we saw today here, enhanced by the mountainous terrain of the Alaska Range, Kenai Peninsula, hit and miss out over the southeast Bering Sea, and most of this coming up close to the coast, may not actually push inland, at least through tomorrow. And from there, looking at the upper level winds, a strong jet here across the Pacific, well to the south of our area. It takes a turn to the northeast and sort of just diverges as it approaches the west coast there. One branch coming up and around. Notice a ridge of high pressure in over the eastern interior. Keep it dry there for sure. Kind of a weak trough here on the western Arctic coast. And 3,000 or 9,000 feet. Winds easterlies 35 to 55 knots here. Still another windy day coming up at this level, and a 50 knot to as high as 60 knots here over the northwest there, with kind of areas of lighter winds in between. Northeasterlies 30 to 50 knots up along the Arctic coast, and things turn west-northwest over the southern Bering and the Aleutians. And at 3,000 feet, 30 to 45 knot winds here off the southeast coast, and taking a turn to easterly at about 50 along the North Gulf Coast, right in across the Alaska Range. Lighter winds here, a couple of low centers there over the Alaska Peninsula. Northwesterlies only 25 to 30 out to the west, and again, strong winds up here over the northwest part of the state. 40 knots or the Seward Peninsula, up to 55 knots there, blowing right across the Point Hope, Cape Lisburne area, probably Kivalina, up to 60 knots there over the Russian Far East. Turbulence, look for severe below 5,000 feet up in this area tomorrow. Also from the Seward Peninsula out to St. Lawrence Island, and then light to moderate chop, low 6 to 8,000 feet anywhere in the turquoise area, and otherwise light to moderate just about everywhere else. Looks like the lightest areas will be out here over the Aleutians, with just some areas of light to moderate chop below about the 6,000 foot level. And after the marine forecasts, or after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Over the past few decades, the helicopter aeromedical industry has proven itself to be a very effective means of saving the lives of those who are critically ill or injured. However, during the relatively short life of our industry, far too many aeromedical programs, its crews, and sometimes its patients have fallen to tragic accidents. And the highest percentage of these crashes have been caused by human error. Now, often this fact leads us to ask the question, what was the pilot thinking? Why did he act the way he did? And what's even more confusing is, why are the same mistakes still being made over and over again throughout our industry? As you go through this training and watch the scenarios, we suggest that you heavily concentrate on the error chain depicted in each scenario and how these steps ultimately lead to a crash. Ask yourself, what were the contributing factors? Were there opportunities to break this chain? Was there a specific culture in a program that affected the pilot's decision-making? And finally, were there direct and/or indirect pressures that influenced the pilot's decision? And finally, before we begin with the scenarios, there are two major points to note. First, none of these scenarios are contrived. Each contain multiple contributing factors and influences taken directly from industry accident and incident reports, as well as confidential surveys recently completed by your peers concerning practices and safety problems within our industry. And second, this video would not be possible if it were not for the support of aeromedical helicopter operators, hospital programs, and their crews, as well as all of the other supporting agencies named in the closing credits of this video. These companies donated their equipment, personnel, and the display of their logos to demonstrate unsafe safety practices in the sincere hope that taking a proactive approach through this training will help to significantly improve the safety record of this worthwhile industry. This hospital-based program has been in continuous service for 15 years and using the same vendor for the past 10 years. Even though both the hospital and the vendor were well respected in their service area for professionalism and response time, the hospital was on a new campaign to bolster its image, and the vendor was doing the same in preparation for contract renewal negotiations about to begin. One area of major concern to the hospital was the drop in the number of scene requests the program received. Recent staff meetings had focused on this concern and ways to improve the scene call numbers. Numerous in-service training and PR flights had been conducted to bolster the use of air care for scene calls, as well as provide additional training for first responders, and it worked. On a beautiful VFR day, the dispatch center received a call from a nearby county for air care to respond to a single-car accident involving a mother and her son. The duty pilot was an experienced aeromedical pilot, but relatively new to this program, and was delighted that a flight request for a scene run had finally come in. Upon departure, the pilot entered the coordinates that the first responder unit called into the air care dispatch. What the dispatch center and the pilot did not know is that the first responder called in incorrect coordinates, which would send the helicopter to a point in the county 15 miles away from the actual scene. When the pilot arrived at the point given, there was no sign of any accident or landing zone. Still new to the area, descriptions of highway numbers and intersections at the actual scene did not help. However, the medical crew was familiar with some of the landmarks they were over, and the pilot relayed this information to the local first responder. Additionally, the first responder's explanation of where they were allowed the air care dispatcher to look up the location on their county grid maps and plot their own lat-longs to give to the pilot. The error was finally cleared up, and the helicopter proceeded to the actual scene location with an ETA of about 12 minutes later than planned. Because the mother was already removed from the vehicle and the helicopter had not arrived, EMS elected to send her by ambulance to a local hospital for initial evaluation. The landing zone was a field next to the road, and EMS and fire crews blocked the road from all traffic for the helicopter. The pilot landed the helicopter so as to position the loading side toward the accident, which also kept the tail rotor out of the direct path of the crews. However, this put the tail into the wind. Since rescue crews were still working on extricating the child from the vehicle, the pilot elected to shut down the helicopter during the wait. Approximately 5 minutes later, the child was freed from the vehicle and loaded into the helicopter. It was obvious to the pilot that this child was in very bad condition and needed to get to the trauma center as quickly as possible. Once the area was clear of ground personnel, the pilot started the helicopter's #1 engine. During the process, a hot start occurred. The pilot glanced back at the medical crew to see them frantically working on this critically injured child. They had no clue that the hot start even occurred or that a problem might exist. The pilot tried the second engine, which started normally, followed by an acceptable restart of the first engine. He still had no idea if any damage had occurred and considered aborting the mission. However, with a blocked roadway, a critically injured child, and engines that seemed to be running fine, the pilot ultimately elected to depart for the trauma center.
Well, looking at marine forecasts here, gales continue here over the southern inside waters tomorrow. And all along the coastline, 40 to 45 knots, small craft advisories here over the central and northern inside channels. And then on Tuesday, we'll hold on to the gales down here over the southern areas, so that next system rolling up from the south there. Small craft advisories, mostly easterlies at about 25, and then lighter winds up along the north coast. And northerlies 20 or 25 knots. Call it 20 knots, higher gusts there for Lynn Canal and probably Glacier Bay. For the Gulf Coast here, easterly 40 knots tomorrow, east-northeast 35 to 40 knots, but lighter winds coming in across Kodiak Island as that front lifts northward, and northeasterlies 20 to 25 for Cook Inlet and Prince William Sound. And on Tuesday, much lighter winds in store for these areas from Prince William Sound into Cook Inlet, just about everywhere here, down to 10 to 15 knots for the North Gulf Coast, 15 knots southeast for Kodiak, northeast for Shelikof Strait, easterlies at about 15 to 20 for the Barren Islands into Kamishak Bay. And for Bristol Bay tomorrow, looks like 30 to 35 knot northeasterlies here, with winds becoming light and variable down on the south side of the peninsula, and south winds at about 15 southwest of Sitkinak. And the outlook for Tuesday, low pressure more or less right in this area, so southeast up to 25 possible from Sitkinak to Chignik, and then from that area on down to Cape Sarachev, southwest 15, more of a north wind on the other side. For the Aleutians, out in the west, northwesterlies 25 knots, and small craft advisories also here through the central areas. From the northwest, 25 to 35 knots. Lighter winds for the Fox Islands and a little more variable. And then those will become north to northwest, but only about 20 knots here for Dutch Harbor and Alaska and Nikolsky. West of Nikolsky, quite an increase, northwesterlies up to 30 knots with small craft advisories extending all the way back to the west here. Then you pick up the gales again from Amchitka Island, more likely Kiska, back to the west. And for the Bering Sea, along the southwest coast, northeasterlies at about 30 knots, and then you get into the gales there, continuing again for St. Lawrence Island, and actually high wind warnings out for that area as well for gusts over 60 miles an hour. So this may be more in the 45 knot range than the 35 knot range, but gales will be out for this area through Tuesday, and northeast 30 knots for the northern Bering Sea, and the freezing spray area staying west of St. Matthew Island, so this 35 knot wind won't be all that cold for the Pribilof Islands. And then for Tuesday, comes a little more northerly, so you should see a drop in the temperatures there, but still holding the freezing spray back to the west and northwest with the heavy icing stuff up across St. Lawrence Island to the Bering Strait. Otherwise, northeast winds here, 25 to 30 knots, good for small craft advisories along the southwest coast. Up along the Arctic coast, again, storm warnings continuing here on the west end, and 30 to 35 knot winds for the Chukchi Sea on in toward Kotzebue Sound. Lightest winds again along the central coast, and then back into the gales here on the east side. And taking a look at Tuesday, winds come down 15 knots now on the central coast, but still 20 to 30 knot northeasterlies or east-northeast winds on the eastern coast, and stays quite windy here. Again, gales and storm force winds over the western portions, but begins to lay down here as you head northeast. Probably lose the gales around Point Lay and then drop it back, as I mentioned, to 15 by the time you get up to the central coast. And for tonight, wind advisories out for the Brooks Range as well as the central interior. That included the Kobuk Valley, the Koyukuk Valley, right into the central interior for gusts, winds gusting over or above 40 miles per hour. And then the wind warning area here along the northwest coast through the Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island, and that's for gusts above 60 miles an hour from the northeast and east. This front pushed a band of light snow up into the interior, probably just mostly cloudy skies with some snow falling, but not a whole lot, with the main low center weakening and drifting back to the west. So those winds coming down for Kodiak Island and the Bristol Bay and Peninsula area tonight, with some periods of rain continuing though due to that continued southeast flow and the next low pressure area and frontal system keeping the gradient pretty tight here. So gale force winds continue tonight and through tomorrow for the southeast coast as that inches its way inland, bring more rain along with it, especially back along the North Gulf Coast. Gale force winds. You can see a lot of lines here across the state, and where the lines are closest together, that's when the winds blow the strongest, and that looks like it's right up in this area here, back down towards St. Lawrence Island, right where the high wind warning is, and also in advance of this front. So pretty windy for the southeast coast as well. Rain and snow showers from the Kuskokwim Delta, Kilbrook Mountains, but could see some clear skies or clearing there along the Yukon Delta coast, Norton Sound. Really not too bad here for the Seward Peninsula, although be a little breezy. Then you pick up some areas of light snow, kind of the remnants of that frontal boundary there, with some clouds. Possible marginal VFR through this area as well, with the IFR down along the North Gulf Coast from Kodiak Island up to the Kenai Peninsula, western Prince William Sound, and then down along the coast. Marginal VFR in over the Panhandle, and rain and snow showers out over the Aleutians. Winds become a little more northerly, so conditions will chill off enough to bring the snowfall level possibly down to sea level for the Pribilofs and central Aleutians, but showers of mostly rain along the peninsula, Kodiak Island, rain and snow showers North Gulf Coast, mostly cloudy, areas of light snow or flurries here over the central and eastern interior, with the driest conditions and windiest again back along the Brooks Range to the north, but less wind and fair across the Yukon Delta. That's a look at the weather. Have a great evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.